The chandelier in the East Room trembled, not from the weight of crystal, but from the seismic shift happening beneath it. Donald John Trump stood at the podium, his hands gripping the oak edges with such force that his knuckles had gone white. The cameras captured everything. The slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, the way his jaw clenched as if holding back thunder, and across from him, seated with the stillness of a man who had weathered far worse storms, Barack Hussein Obama met his gaze with an expression that would haunt Trump for years to come. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something far more devastating, complete, unshakable composure. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, in Queens, New York City, the fourth of 5 children, to Frederick Christ, Trump and Marianne McLeod. Trump. From his earliest memories, the world had been a stage, and he was determined to command it. His father, a ruthless real estate developer who built his empire in the outer boroughs of New York, had taught him one fundamental truth. In this world, you were either a winner or a loser. There was no in-between. There was no participation trophy. There was no second place. By the time Donald was a teenager, he had absorbed this philosophy into every fiber of his being. At the New York Military Academy in Cornwall-on-Hudson, where his parents sent him at age 13 to instill discipline, young Donald learned to channel his boundless energy and competitive drive. He became the cadet captain, led the baseball team, and discovered that leadership was not given, it was taken. The military academy taught him something else too, the power of presence, of walking into a room and owning every square inch of it before uttering a single word. His rise through the Manhattan real estate world was not meteoric, it was volcanic. Trump Tower, rising 48 stories above Fifth Avenue, became more than a building. It became a monument to everything he believed about himself. Gold-plated elevators. His name in brass letters taller than most men. Every surface reflecting back an image of success that he had crafted as deliberately as any architect designs a skyline. But for all his achievements, the casinos in Atlantic City, the Miss Universe pageants, the reality television empire that turned "You're fired" into a national catchphrase, there was one arena where Trump had always felt like an outsider looking in: politics. The establishment looked down on him. The Ivy League politicians, with their carefully modulated voices and their measured statements, treated him like an entertainer who had wandered into the wrong room. And no one embodied that establishment dismissiveness more than Barack Hussein Obama. Barack was born on August 4, 1961, in Honolulu, Hawaii, to Ann Dunham, a young woman from Kansas, and Barack Obama Sr., a Kenyan economist who would largely be absent from his son's life. Barack's childhood was a study in displacement, Indonesia, Hawaii, the search for identity that comes when you belong fully to no single world. His mother remarried, moved him across oceans, and young Barack learned to adapt, to observe, to listen before speaking. Where Trump had inherited wealth and a clear path, Obama had constructed himself from fragments. He read voraciously James Baldwin, Malcolm X, the philosophical works that helped him understand his place in a nation still wrestling with its original sin of racism. At Occidental College, then Columbia University, and finally Harvard Law School, Barack developed the intellectual framework that would define his political career. But more importantly, he developed something Trump would never understand: the capacity to remain still when storms raged around him. Obama's composure was not merely temperament, it was strategy. It was survival. Growing up as a black man in America, he had learned early that reaction could be weaponized against you. That losing your temper, raising your voice, showing the anger that circumstances might justify, these were luxuries he could not afford. The angry black man stereotype was a trap, and Barack had learned to sidestep it with a grace that infuriated those who wanted to provoke him. His political rise had been improbable. State senator from Illinois, United States senator. And then, in 2008, the unthinkable, the 44th President of the United States, the first African American to hold the office. His victory was not just personal, it was historical, tectonic, a reshaping of what Americans believed possible about themselves and their nation. For 8 years, Obama had occupied the office that Trump would later claim. And during those 8 years, Trump had watched. He had criticized. He had, most infamously, pushed the birther conspiracy theory, the baseless claim that Obama was not born in the United States and was therefore an illegitimate president. For years, Trump had demanded to see Obama's birth certificate, had questioned his academic credentials, had suggested that this accomplished constitutional law professor and president was somehow a fraud. The birther movement was more than a political attack. It was personal. It struck at the core of Obama's identity, his legitimacy, his very right to exist in the spaces he had earned through excellence and effort. And Obama had responded to years of this assault with his characteristic composure. A slight smile, a dismissive shake of the head, the occasional devastating joke delivered at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Trump sat stone-faced as the room laughed. That dinner in 2011 would become legendary. Obama, standing at the podium, had roasted Trump with surgical precision while the cameras captured every moment of Trump's humiliation. Many observers would later point to that night as the spark that ignited Trump's political ambitions, not out of service, but out of vengeance. Now, years later, the two men found themselves in the same room once again. The circumstances had shifted. Power had changed hands. But the fundamental tension between them remained. Two men who represented not just different policies, but different visions of what America was, what it could be, and who deserved to lead it. The relationship between Trump and Obama existed within a larger story that stretched back generations, a story about power in America, about who was allowed to wield it, and what happened when those boundaries were challenged. Trump came from a world of country clubs and cocktail parties where men who looked like him had always been in charge. His father had built housing in Brooklyn and Queens, profiting from the post-war boom while carefully excluding black families from his developments. The Department of Justice had sued Trump management not once but twice for racial discrimination, and though the cases settled without admission of guilt, the pattern was clear. The Trump family had built their fortune on a foundation of exclusion, on the unspoken understanding that some people belonged and others did not. This was the world Donald had inherited, and it shaped his understanding of everything that followed. When he looked at Barack Obama, he did not see a brilliant lawyer, a loving father, a man who had overcome extraordinary obstacles. He saw a disruption, an anomaly, someone who had risen to heights that men like Trump believed were reserved for men like themselves. Obama, for his part, understood this dynamic with painful clarity. His memoir would later describe the particular exhaustion of being the first, the constant awareness that every failure would be attributed to his race, that every success would be qualified by those who insisted he must have received special treatment. He had learned to excel beyond reproach, to be so competent that criticism could find no purchase. And still, it came. The birther conspiracy had been the most public manifestation of a suspicion that followed Obama throughout his career. The persistent question, never spoken aloud in polite company, but always present, of whether a black man truly belonged in rooms of power. Trump had given voice to what many thought but dared not say, and in doing so, he had earned a certain following among those who resented Obama's rise. The two men existed in parallel universes that occasionally, catastrophically, intersected. Trump's universe was one of gilt and marble, where success was measured in square footage and media coverage. Obama's universe was one of policy papers and coalition building, where success was measured in lives improved and rights protected. Neither understood the other's world, and neither particularly cared to. But beyond their personal animosity lay deeper currents in American society. The 2016 election had exposed fissures that many had preferred to ignore. Economic anxiety in the heartland, racial resentment simmering beneath polite discourse, a media landscape fractured into echo chambers where facts themselves became matters of partisan dispute. Obama had governed during a time of relative stability, while Trump's ascent signaled that the ground beneath American politics was shifting in ways no one fully understood. The event that would bring them together again had been months in the making. A bipartisan summit on national security, convened in the aftermath of international crises that demanded at least the appearance of unity. Former presidents were invited alongside the current administration, a gesture toward continuity and shared purpose. In theory. In practice, everyone knew that putting Trump and Obama in the same room was like combining volatile chemicals. The question was not whether there would be a reaction, but when and how explosive it would be. The intelligence briefings that preceded the summit contained information that Trump believed would finally allow him to do what years of tweets and accusations had failed to accomplish: definitively expose Obama as the fraud he had always claimed him to be. The details were complicated, involving foreign policy decisions, classified communications, bureaucratic processes that few Americans understood or cared about. But Trump had seized on certain fragments, had constructed a narrative in which Obama had overstepped his authority, had acted against American interests, had committed what Trump would dramatically call treason. The actual facts were far more ambiguous. Obama had made decisions during his presidency that, like all executive decisions, could be criticized or defended depending on one's perspective and priorities. But in Trump's mind, nuance did not exist. There were winners and losers, good guys and bad guys, and he had finally gathered what he believed was proof that Obama was a bad guy. What Trump did not understand, what he had never understood about Obama, was that preparation and composure were not the same as vulnerability. Obama had been underestimated his entire life by men who mistook his calm for weakness, his thoughtfulness for hesitation, his measured responses for inability to fight back. The trap that Trump believed he was setting was about to spring in a direction he never anticipated. The days before the summit crackled with an energy that everyone felt but no one acknowledged. In the West Wing, staff members spoke in hushed voices, aware that their boss was planning something but unsure exactly what. Trump had been uncharacteristically secretive, meeting with a small group of advisors behind closed doors, emerging with a smile that suggested satisfaction bordering on triumph. "He thinks he's got something," one aide whispered to another in the hallway outside the Oval Office. "Something big. About Obama." The aide who heard this felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They had been through enough of Trump's big revelations to know that the build-up rarely matched the delivery. But there was something different this time, a coiled intensity in Trump's demeanor that suggested he believed he had finally found the ammunition he had been seeking for years. Meanwhile, in his office in Washington, Barack Obama reviewed the summit materials with his characteristic thoroughness. His staff had briefed him on the logistics, the other attendees, the expected topics of discussion. They had also, more delicately, warned him that Trump might attempt to use the occasion for political theater. Obama had nodded, his expression revealing nothing. He had dealt with Trump before, at the White House during the transition, in the countless moments of criticism and accusation that had followed. He had developed what his staff called his Trump protocol: remain calm, refuse to be baited, respond with facts when necessary, and silence when silence served better. But even Obama's team could not have anticipated what was coming. In the days before the summit, strange things began happening. Leaked documents appeared in certain media outlets, selectively edited, stripped of context, designed to create the impression of wrongdoing where none existed. Trump's allies in Congress demanded investigations. Cable news exploded with speculation about what Obama might have done during his final months in office. Obama watched these developments with the detachment of someone who had been through similar cycles before. Controversy, outrage, demands for accountability. And then, when the facts emerged, a quiet retreat by those who had made the accusations. The pattern was familiar. The exhaustion of living through it again and again was equally familiar. What Obama did not know was that Trump planned to use the summit itself as the stage for his accusation. Not through leaked documents or congressional allies, but face-to-face, with cameras rolling, in a moment designed to humiliate Obama in real time while the world watched. Trump had rehearsed his remarks with the attention to detail that he usually reserved for reality television. He knew exactly when he would pivot from the scheduled topics to his attack. He had memorized the key phrases, the damning statistics, cherry-picked and stripped of context, the rhetorical questions designed to make Obama appear evasive if he didn't respond and guilty if he did. If Trump were in your position, planning what he believed would be a devastating public confrontation, would you have the courage to go through with it or the wisdom to step back? Let me know in the comments what you think as this story unfolds. In his mind, Trump imagined the moment of triumph. Obama stammering, caught off guard, the composed mass finally cracking to reveal the incompetence and deception beneath. Trump would stand tall, vindicated at last, the birther movement and years of criticism finally proven justified. The establishment that had mocked him at that 2011 dinner would have to admit they had been wrong. He would be the hero who exposed the fraud. The night before the summit, Trump slept fitfully, his dreams filled with images of victory. Obama, according to later reports, slept soundly, read a few chapters of a novel, and kissed his wife goodnight with no particular concern about what the morning would bring. The morning of the event dawned gray and overcast in Washington, the kind of weather that matched neither man's expectations, but seemed appropriate for what was to come. The East Room of the White House had been transformed for the occasion. Flags hung precisely, cameras positioned at angles designed to capture every expression, every gesture. The assembled dignitaries, former officials, current cabinet members, foreign diplomats, filled rows of chairs arranged in careful semicircles. The atmosphere was one of forced cordiality, the kind of polite tension that precedes events everyone knows will be remembered. Trump entered first, as protocol required. He moved through the room with the proprietary air of a man returning to territory he considered his by right. Handshakes were exchanged, brief words that meant nothing, the rituals of political gatherings that served to mask the calculations happening behind every smile. Obama entered minutes later, accompanied by a small staff. His entrance was quieter, less theatrical, but the room shifted perceptibly when he appeared. There was something about his presence, the way he carried himself, the ease with which he navigated social situations, that reminded everyone of a different time, a different administration, perhaps a different country. The two men did not greet each other immediately. They circled the room in separate orbits, acknowledging different groups, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while every observer waited for the moment when they would finally stand face to face. It came sooner than expected. Trump approached Obama near the refreshment table, where the former president was speaking with a European diplomat about climate policy. The conversation stopped as Trump's presence became unavoidable. Barack, Trump said, the single name carrying a weight of condescension that was audible to everyone within earshot. "Donald," Obama replied, his voice neutral, his expression pleasant, in a way that revealed nothing. The two men shook hands, a brief, formal contact that cameras captured from multiple angles. In the grip, observers later noted, there was none of the competitive squeezing that Trump was known for. Obama simply allowed the handshake to happen and released it when appropriate. The summit began. Speakers addressed topics of genuine importance: international security arrangements, economic cooperation, the challenges facing democracies in an era of rising authoritarianism. Obama listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. Trump fidgeted in his seat, checking the time, waiting for the moment he had planned. It came during the Q&A session. A moderator had just finished fielding a question about NATO commitments when Trump raised his hand, an unusual gesture for a former president who typically allowed current officials to lead such discussions. "I have something to say," Trump announced, standing before he was called upon. The room fell silent, with the particular tension of an audience sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. Trump walked to the podium, displacing the scheduled speaker with the force of his certainty. He straightened his tie, surveyed the room, and let the silence build. This was his element, the moment before the reveal, the dramatic pause that reality television had taught him to deploy. "For years," Trump began, his voice carrying the cadence of a prosecutor's opening statement, "we have been told that President Obama, the former president, was a great leader, that he served this country honorably, that his decisions were always made with America's best interests at heart." He paused, letting the words hang. "But I have information, documented, verified information, that proves otherwise. Information that the American people deserve to know. Information that shows President Obama made decisions that put foreign interests ahead of American interests. That he used the powers of his office not to protect this country, but to protect himself and his political allies." The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras swiveled. Journalists who had expected a routine summit began typing frantically on their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing something that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Trump produced a folder, physical, tangible, theatrical. He held it up like an attorney presenting a murder weapon. "It's all here," he said. "The communications, the decisions, the proof that what I have been saying for years is true. Barack Obama is a fraud, and today, the whole world is going to know it." He turned to face Obama directly, pointing the folder at him like a weapon. "Would you like to respond, Barack? Would you like to explain to the American people why you did what you did? Or are you going to sit there with that smug look on your face and pretend you don't know what I'm talking about?" Every camera in the room focused on Obama. The moment stretched. Staff members who knew him held their breath, waiting to see how he would respond to this unprecedented public attack. Barack Obama remained seated for 3 full seconds, a lifetime in political theater. Then, with the unhurried movements of a man who had considered and rejected every possible rushed response, he rose from his chair. The East Room seemed to contract around the two men. Observers would later describe a quality of stillness that descended as Obama walked toward the podium, not the stillness of fear or uncertainty, but something more profound, the stillness of absolute control. Trump's smile remained fixed, confident that he had engineered a trap from which there was no escape. He had imagined this moment countless times. Obama flustered, defensive, reaching for explanations that would only make him appear more guilty. The camera would capture the moment when the mask finally slipped, and Trump would be vindicated. Instead, Obama approached the podium with the measured gait of a man approaching a lectern at Harvard Law, about to deliver a lecture on constitutional principles. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He simply walked, and in his walking, he communicated something that Trump's bluster could not touch. "Thank you, Donald, for the opportunity to address your concerns directly," Obama said, his voice carrying the warm, modulated tones that had served him through 8 years in the highest office. "I think the American people deserve to understand what you're actually holding in that folder." Trump's smile flickered, the first crack in his certainty. "Would you like to show them?" Obama continued. "Would you like to read aloud the specific documents you're referencing? Because I think you'll find, as many have found before, that context matters, that selective editing creates impressions that complete information dispels." The room was utterly silent. Trump had not prepared for this particular response. He had prepared for anger, for denial, for the defensive crouch that would make his accusations seem plausible. He had not prepared for a cross-examination. "Let me help you," Obama offered, his tone almost gentle. "The decisions you're referencing, I assume you're referencing the foreign policy transitions of my final months in office, were made in consultation with the intelligence community, with bipartisan congressional leadership, and in accordance with established legal authorities. Every one of those decisions was documented, reviewed, and supported by the professionals who serve this country, regardless of which party holds the White House." Trump opened the folder, searching for the specific ammunition he had planned to deploy. But Obama continued, not allowing him to regain control of the moment. "What you're doing right now, Donald, and I say this not with anger, but with genuine concern for the institutions we both swore to protect, is attempting to use a forum dedicated to national security to settle personal grievances. You're presenting selectively edited materials in a context designed to prevent proper understanding. You're treating the presidency like the reality television show you used to host, where dramatic reveals matter more than truth." Obama paused, and in that pause, he did something that witnesses would remember for years. He smiled. Not the tight, forced smile of a man under attack, but the genuine, slightly sad smile of a teacher watching a student repeat a familiar mistake. "I've known you for many years, Donald. I've watched you build buildings and casinos. I've watched you host television shows. I've watched you enter politics with the same approach you brought to everything else, the belief that winning is the only thing that matters, and that winning means making someone else lose. But governance is not reality television. And this," he gestured at the room, the cameras, the assembled dignitaries, "is not a boardroom where you can fire people who disagree with you." Trump attempted to interject, but Obama raised one hand, a gesture so measured, so presidential, that even Trump's voice caught in his throat. "You wanted me to be angry," Obama said, his voice softening further. "You wanted me to react the way you react when you feel attacked, with fury, with counter-accusation, with the kind of escalation that turns every disagreement into a war. But I learned a long time ago that responding to provocation with provocation serves no one except those who benefit from chaos." The words hung in the air, and something shifted in the room's atmosphere. Trump, still holding his folder, looked suddenly diminished, not physically, but in some essential quality of presence that had always been his greatest asset. "So here is what I am going to do," Obama continued. "I am going to sit back down. I am going to listen to the rest of this summit, which addresses issues of genuine importance to the American people and to our allies around the world. And I am going to trust that the journalists in this room and the citizens watching at home can distinguish between evidence and theater." He turned to walk back to his seat, then paused, looking back at Trump with an expression that held neither triumph nor malice. "You have the floor, Donald. Say whatever you need to say. I think you'll find that an audience is not the same as validation, and that volume is not the same as truth." Obama returned to his seat. The room remained silent for several long moments. Trump stood at the podium, the folder still in his hand, suddenly aware that every reaction available to him had been anticipated and diffused. In the hours following the summit, Trump retreated to spaces where he could control the narrative. First Air Force One, then Mar-a-Lago, surrounded by advisors who had learned that delivering bad news was a career-ending move. But even in these carefully curated environments, he could not escape what had happened. The footage played on every network, the analysis unanimous. Trump had attempted an ambush and been met with a response so composed, so devastating in its restraint, that it made his accusations seem not dangerous, but desperate. What do you think it takes to maintain that level of composure when someone is publicly attacking your character, your legacy, your very legitimacy? Could you have done what Obama did? Or would you have responded differently? Share your thoughts below. The psychological impact on Trump was profound but invisible to most observers. Those who knew him well noticed small changes. A tendency to change channels more quickly when Obama's face appeared, an unusual reluctance to discuss the summit, a defensive brittleness when aides attempted to spin the event as anything other than what it was. For the first time in his public life, Donald Trump had been outmaneuvered by stillness. He had built his entire persona on the ability to dominate through force of personality, to bend situations to his will through sheer assertion. And Obama had simply refused to participate in that game, had shown that there was another kind of strength, one that did not need to prove itself, that was confident enough to remain quiet, that understood that some battles are won by declining to fight them. The transformation in Trump was not immediate or obvious. He continued to tweet, to hold rallies, to project the image of invincibility that his supporters expected. But something had shifted beneath the surface. A doubt had been planted, perhaps for the first time, about whether his methods, the aggression, the accusations, the constant assertion of dominance, were actually as effective as he had always believed. Obama, for his part, experienced a different kind of transformation. In the days after the summit, he found himself reflecting on the encounter with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. He had done what he needed to do, protected his legacy, demonstrated that composure could defeat chaos. But there was no joy in it. He thought about the country he had served, about the divisions that seemed to widen with every passing year. He thought about his daughters, about the world they would inherit, about whether the American experiment could survive this era of constant combat. He thought about Trump, not as an adversary, but as a symptom of something deeper, something that would not be resolved by any single moment of victory. In his private journal, Obama wrote words that captured his state of mind. The hardest thing about leadership is not the decisions themselves, but the loneliness of carrying their weight. Today I chose restraint over reaction, as I have chosen so many times before. Whether it was the right choice, history will judge. What I know is that I can live with who I was in that room, and that may be the only victory that matters. Months passed. The summit faded from headlines, replaced by new controversies, new cycles of outrage and response. But for those who had witnessed the confrontation directly, the memory remained vivid, a reference point for understanding the fundamental differences between two men who had both held the highest office. Trump's team had attempted to reframe the narrative. They released edited clips showing only Trump's accusations without Obama's response. They flooded social media with claims that the mainstream media had suppressed the real story. They held events where surrogates repeated the allegations from the folder, insisting that the truth would eventually emerge. None of it worked. The complete footage existed, and anyone who watched it saw what had actually happened. Trump had thrown a punch, and Obama had not ducked or counterattacked. He had simply absorbed it, demonstrating that some blows carry no force when met with enough composure. As the anniversary of the summit approached, both men were invited to participate in a televised retrospective, a conversation about leadership, legacy, and the state of American democracy. The invitation was extended to both, with the explicit understanding that they would appear together not in separate segments. Trump's advisors urged him to decline. The risk was too great, they argued. He had lost the first confrontation. Why give Obama another opportunity for victory? Better to stay away, to let the moment fade, to focus on forward-looking narratives that did not involve direct comparison with his predecessor. But Trump could not stay away. The defeat at the summit had lodged in his psyche like a splinter, irritating every time he moved. He needed a rematch. He needed to prove that the first encounter had been an anomaly, that he had simply been caught off guard, that with proper preparation he could dominate the exchange, as he dominated every exchange. Obama's team raised similar concerns. Why revisit a moment that had already been resolved in his favor? Why give Trump another platform, another opportunity to spread misinformation, another chance to turn a legitimate conversation into a circus? Obama's response surprised his advisors. The American people deserve to see that their leaders can disagree without destroying each other, he said. If I refuse to share a stage with him, I'm admitting that his methods work, that the only way to deal with chaos is to avoid it entirely. That's not leadership. That's surrender. So both men agreed to appear. The broadcast was scheduled for prime time, with a moderator chosen for their reputation for fairness, and the format designed to ensure that both participants would have equal time to speak. In the days before the appearance, Trump prepared differently than he had for the summit. He brought in debate coaches, communications experts, psychologists who specialized in understanding opponents. He studied footage of Obama's past interviews, looking for weaknesses, patterns, moments when the composure had slipped. What he found frustrated him. Obama's record of public appearances showed almost no moments of visible anger, no loss of control that could be exploited. The man was, Trump realized with grudging respect and growing frustration, almost supernaturally disciplined. Obama's preparation was simpler. He reviewed the facts of the matters Trump was likely to raise. He practiced responses that were accurate without being defensive. And he spent time in meditation, a practice he had developed over years of dealing with pressure, cultivating the inner stillness that would allow him to respond to whatever Trump might do with clarity rather than reaction. The night before the broadcast, both men struggled with sleep. Trump with the anticipation of finally achieving the victory that had eluded him. Obama with the weight of representing something larger than himself, the hope that civil discourse could still exist in a fractured nation. The studio was smaller than viewers at home would realize, a concentrated space designed to create intimacy between guests and audience. Two chairs faced each other at a slight angle, allowing both participants to speak to each other and to the camera. The moderator sat to the side, close enough to intervene if necessary, but positioned to minimize their presence in the visual frame. Trump arrived first, as his team had insisted. He wanted to be established, comfortable, the presence that Obama would have to approach. He wore his usual suit, red tie, every element calculated to project power and authority. Obama arrived precisely on time, not early, not late. He wore a dark suit with a subtle blue tie, his expression pleasant and unrevealing. The two men did not shake hands as they took their seats. The format had been designed to skip such rituals, focusing immediately on substance. The moderator opened with a question about the summit. That day became one of the most discussed moments in recent political history. Let's start with your perspectives on what actually happened. Trump leaned forward, his energy immediately filling the space. What happened is exactly what I said happened. I presented evidence of misconduct, and instead of addressing it, Barack did what he always does. He deflected. He used fancy language. He avoided the substance because he couldn't deny the facts. Obama listened without visible reaction. When Trump finished, he spoke, calmly. I think viewers can watch the complete footage and draw their own conclusions about who addressed substance and who relied on performance. What I would add is this. The documents Donald presented that day have since been examined by independent fact-checkers, by journalists, by congressional committees. Every single allegation he made has been evaluated and found to lack evidentiary support. If Donald has new evidence that hasn't been examined, I would welcome its presentation, but repeating disproven claims doesn't make them true. Trump's face reddened slightly. The mainstream media is part of the cover-up. Of course, they're going to say the claims are disproven. They've been protecting you for years. That's a convenient argument, Obama replied, his voice remaining level. If evidence supports your claims, you cite it. If evidence contradicts your claims, you say the evidence is fake. At some point, Donald, you have to engage with reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. The exchange continued, each topic revealing the same fundamental dynamic. Trump would make aggressive assertions. Obama would respond with measured counter-arguments. Trump would escalate his rhetoric. Obama would decline to match the escalation. What viewers witnessed was not a debate in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration of two entirely different approaches to conflict. The pivotal moment came 40 minutes into the broadcast. Trump, frustrated by his inability to provoke a reaction, shifted tactics. Instead of attacking Obama's record, he attacked Obama's character. "You think you're better than me," Trump said, his voice dropping to something close to a snarl. "You've always thought that. You and your fancy degrees and your nice family and your smooth talk. But I know what you really are. You're a fraud. You're someone who never had to fight for anything, who got everything handed to you because of—" He stopped himself, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air. The implication was clear. Both men knew what Trump had almost said. Obama was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a quality that viewers had rarely heard. Not anger exactly, but something deeper, more personal. "I grew up without my father. I was raised by a single mother who struggled to make ends meet. I worked my way through school. I passed the same bar exam that every other lawyer passes. I earned my Senate seat, and I earned the presidency, with more votes than any candidate before me. I did not inherit a real estate empire. I did not receive loans from my father. I built my life from nothing, Donald. And I did it while facing obstacles that you cannot imagine because of the color of my skin." He paused, letting the words settle. "You want to talk about who had things handed to them? Look in the mirror, and then ask yourself why my existence, my success, bothers you so much that you've spent years trying to delegitimize it." The studio fell absolutely silent. Trump opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For perhaps the first time in his public life, he had no response. "I don't hate you, Donald," Obama continued, his voice softening. "I pity you, because you've had every advantage that life can offer, and yet you're still so insecure that you can't stand to see someone else succeed. That's not strength. That's not power. That's the most profound weakness I can imagine." Trump sat back in his chair, visibly shaken. The cameras captured everything. The slight tremor in his hand, the way his eyes darted to the side, the collapse of the certainty that had always been his armor. "I think," Obama said, turning to the moderator, "we've said enough for one evening." The broadcast was watched by over 40 million Americans. The footage of Trump's silence following Obama's statement was replayed, analyzed, and interpreted across the political spectrum. For Obama's supporters, it was vindication, proof that their man could not only match Trump's aggression, but transcend it. For Trump's supporters, it was an attack, more evidence of the establishment's determination to destroy their champion. But beyond the partisan responses, something subtler occurred. People who had watched the exchange found themselves thinking about their own lives, their own conflicts, their own choices about how to respond to provocation. Obama had demonstrated that composure was possible, that one could be attacked, challenged, undermined, and still maintain one's dignity without surrendering one's strength. Trump retreated from public appearances for several weeks following the broadcast. His social media posts continued, but observers noted a different quality, more defensive, less bombastic, as though some essential confidence had been shaken. The invincibility that had been his greatest asset had cracked, and once cracked, it could never be fully restored. Obama, for his part, declined to comment further on the exchange. His team released a brief statement thanking viewers for their attention and expressing hope that Americans could find ways to disagree without destroying each other. He returned to his foundation work, his writing, his life after the presidency. But those who knew him well noticed something different in the weeks that followed. A lightness, perhaps. Or maybe just the particular relief that comes from facing something you've long dreaded and discovering that you were equal to it. There is a moment in every conflict when the outcome becomes inevitable, not because one side has won, but because the terms of engagement have been defined in ways that favor one approach over another. Donald Trump had spent his entire life believing that victory belonged to those who fought the hardest, who pushed the most aggressively, who refused to back down under any circumstances. And for many years that belief had served him well. He had built buildings, amassed wealth, hosted television shows, and won the presidency using exactly those tactics. But Barack Obama had learned a different lesson, one that came from a different history, a different experience, a different understanding of what strength actually means. He had learned that some battles cannot be won through force, that some opponents cannot be defeated by meeting aggression with aggression, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in the game as it has been defined. In the confrontation between these two men, America saw itself reflected. The choice between chaos and composure, between reaction and restraint, between the belief that winning requires destroying your opponent and the faith that lasting victory comes from something quieter, the confidence to stand still when the world expects you to fight. History will judge both men. History will assess their policies, their legacies, their contributions to the American experiment. But in that moment, in that studio, under those lights with millions watching, something true was revealed about the nature of power and the character of those who seek it. Trump believed he had Obama trapped, and in a way he did, trapped in a situation that required a response. But the response Obama chose was not the one Trump expected. It was not fury. It was not fear. It was something far more devastating. It was peace. Sometimes in life, we face moments that test not just our arguments, but our character. Moments when someone attacks everything we've built, everything we believe, everything we are. And in those moments, we have to choose. Do we meet aggression with aggression? Do we let their anger become our anger? Or do we find something deeper, a composure that doesn't mean weakness, a stillness that doesn't mean surrender? What would you do if you were in Barack Obama's position that day? Would you have been able to maintain that composure? Or would you have responded, differently? And if you face similar moments in your own life, moments when someone tried to provoke you, to diminish you, to trap you, how did you respond? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about power and composure and what it means to truly win, consider subscribing so you don't miss future stories that challenge how we think about ourselves and each other. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response is the one no one expects.